Mr. Hensley, why are you asking us for $6,000? Helen Foster kept her voice low, but the question still seemed to strike the walls of her office. Outside the glass, people stood in line with deposit slips and winter coats. A little girl pressed her palm against the window of the branch, fogging the glass with her breath. Everything looked ordinary. The only thing that had changed was the woman across from me. 10 minutes earlier, she had been a courteous bank manager reviewing a small home repair loan. Now she had locked her office door and lowered the blinds halfway. I set both hands on the folder in my lap. Inside were 3 estimates for a replacement furnace, the cheapest one just under $6,000, because mine had failed Tuesday night. I told her the house had been 44 degrees when I woke. I could manage with space heaters for a few days, I said, but January was coming, and January in Millbrook Falls did not forgive. Helen turned her monitor away from the lobby glass. Her face had gone pale in a way that had nothing to do with the loan. That isn't quite what I mean, she said. She tapped one line on the screen. I saw my own full name. I saw the last 4 digits of my social security number. Then I saw a number with more commas in it than anything that had ever belonged to me. $26,804,191. For a moment, I thought the account had to belong to someone else who shared my name. I was 72 years old. I had spent 37 years as a signal maintainer for the Cedar Line Railroad, climbing into relay boxes in blizzards so trains 100 miles away could trust a green light. My pension and Social Security together came to a little over $4,800 a month. According to my son, nearly everything else had gone into my late wife's medical bills and my own bypass surgery. I clipped coupons. I drove a Buick older than most of the children who rode bicycles past my porch. I had put off fixing that porch for 2 years because Marcus told me there simply wasn't money for it. That can't be mine, I said. Helen's eyes flicked toward the office door before she answered. It's a family trust, she said. You're listed as the sole lifetime beneficiary. Our bank absorbed the fiduciary company that administered it 8 months ago. The records were only fully merged into our system last week. Your Social Security number triggered a match the moment I ran your loan application. Who controls it? I asked. She hesitated, and that hesitation told me more than the number on the screen had. My son, I said. It wasn't a question anymore. Helen nodded once. Marcus Hensley is listed as the acting distribution advisor under an incapacity provision. The correspondent's address on file is his home on Larkfield Ridge. There is also a corporate co-trustee of record. I did not shout. I did not ask her to repeat the figure. I did not picture boats or vacation homes or a house somewhere warm. I thought of my wife, Eleanor, murmuring to me from a hospital bed 9 years earlier, her voice thin from the medication. Don't let the children turn money into a wall between them, Walter. Promise me. I had believed the danger had died along with the modest little portfolio I assumed she'd left behind. I slid the loan folder off her desk and set it aside. Print me everything you're legally permitted to give me, I said. Mr. Hensley, there are restrictions on distribution history, but as the named beneficiary, you have a right to a full accounting. Then start there, I said. Helen studied me a moment longer than felt comfortable. Do you have an attorney? She asked. Not anymore, I admitted. Do you have somewhere safe to stay tonight? The question tightened something behind my ribs in a way the balance on the screen had not. Why would I need somewhere safe? I asked. She turned the monitor further toward me and pointed at a recent entry. It wasn't a withdrawal. It was a notation from the trust department, petition for permanent guardianship, pending, supporting documents received from Marcus Hensley. The date stamped that morning. My son had filed papers asking a court to declare me mentally incompetent on the very same day I happened to walk into a bank and discover the fortune he had hidden from me for 9 years. I closed the folder and stood. My knees felt steady, though I could hear my own pulse in my ears. Mrs. Foster, I said, please don't call my son. Bank policy may require our trust department to notify the acting advisor that you came in and asked questions, she said carefully. I'm not asking you to break any law, I said, buttoning my coat. I'm asking you to follow it very slowly. For the first time, a little warmth came back into her face. I can do that, she said. I reached the door, looked back once at the impossible number still glowing on her screen, and said, Please cancel the loan application. She almost smiled. Neither of us found it funny. Mr. Hensley, she said, this account may be yours, but that doesn't mean the money is safe. I understand, I told her. I did not yet, but by nightfall I would understand that my son hadn't merely stolen money. He had stolen my name, my choices, and 8 years with my daughter. The 26 million was only the trail he had failed to erase. The temperature outside was 19 degrees. I sat in the Buick with the engine running and watched people move through the bank's revolving door like nothing in the world had shifted under their feet. My first instinct, God help me, was to call Marcus. That instinct embarrassed me later, but it had been trained into me for 9 years. When the insurance company mangled a claim, I called Marcus. When a property tax notice looked wrong, I called Marcus. When my debit card stopped working at the grocery store, I called Marcus, and he explained that he'd moved funds between accounts to protect me from a scam alert. He was 44, sharp-dressed, patient when he wanted to be, and remarkably good at making control feel like devotion. 9 years earlier, 3 days after my bypass, I woke to find him at my bedside holding a legal pad. Don't worry about the bills, Dad, he'd said. Eleanor had died only 5 months before that. Grief had turned ordinary tasks into walls I couldn't climb. I could splice a signal cable in a snowstorm with numb fingers, but I could not open an envelope addressed to both our names without losing the rest of the afternoon to it. Marcus offered to handle the paperwork. I signed a temporary financial power of attorney while a nurse witnessed it, a document meant to expire in 90 days. It never did, not on paper anyone showed me, and not in practice. At first he showed me every statement. Then the paper statements simply stopped arriving. Everything's gone digital, Dad, he told me. When I asked for the passwords, he said the websites were confusing and full of scam artists preying on people my age. That should have insulted me. Instead, I heard concern in his voice, because I wanted to hear it. He began moving my pension into a household account and sending me a fixed amount each month for groceries and utilities. If I needed more, I asked. He never called it an allowance. That was simply what it became. There isn't much left after your mother's care, he'd remind me whenever I mentioned the porch. We have to make it last, Dad. Eleanor's final year had cost a great deal. Insurance covered most of it, but not all. And Marcus showed me spreadsheets full of pharmacy costs and private nursing and legal fees I never once added up myself. A man can spend his whole life teaching his children honesty and still fail to check whether the lesson took. My phone rang on the passenger seat. Marcus. For one foolish second I wondered whether he already knew. I let it ring 4 times before I answered. Hey Dad, where are you? He asked. His voice bright and careless in a way I used to trust completely. I stopped by with Denise. Your car's gone. I had errands, I said. The roads are clear. A pause. Marcus never liked answers he hadn't approved in advance. Did you go to the pharmacy? He asked. Among other places, I said. What other places, Dad? I looked across the lot at Helen's shaded office window. Why do you ask? I said. He laughed, but it landed a fraction of a second too late. Because your furnace is out and you're supposed to be taking it easy. Denise found a placement with an opening this week. Just respite care, just until we get things sorted. I'm not moving anywhere, I said. Nobody said permanently, Dad. This stubbornness is exactly what worries us. His voice softened in the practiced way he used whenever other people might be listening. You left the stove burner on last month. I left a kettle on for 6 minutes while I reset a breaker in the basement, I said. You forgot it. This is exactly what I mean, Marcus said. You always have an explanation. In the background, I heard Denise murmur something. Marcus muffled the phone. I caught 2 words through the static bank and today. When he came back, the warmth in his voice had drained out of it entirely. Did you try to take out a loan? He asked. There it was. Who told you that? I asked. I get the credit alerts, Dad. We agreed I'd monitor them. We had never agreed to any such thing. He had simply done it, the same way he had done everything else for 9 years, and called it agreement after the fact. The furnace needs replacing, I said. I told you I would handle it, Dad. You told me there wasn't enough money, I said. There isn't enough to throw $6,000 at the first contractor who scares an old man, Marcus said. I had 3 estimates, I said. Silence. For years I had mistaken his silence for patience. Sitting in that cold parking lot, I finally understood what it actually was. Calculation. Which bank? He asked. Why does that matter? I said. His tone sharpened. Which bank, Dad? I watched my own breath fog the windshield and said nothing. You'll see us Sunday, he said. We're coming by tonight. The house is cold, I told him. Then tell me where you are. I'm 72, Marcus. Not missing. This isn't about permission, he said. It's about safety. Goodbye, I said, and ended the call. My hand was shaking. I hated that it was shaking. I pressed it flat against the wheel until it stopped. There was only one lawyer I could think to call, and I hadn't spoken to him since Eleanor's funeral. Arthur Bellamy had drafted our wills and handled her father's small estate decades earlier. He kept an office above a hardware store in downtown Fenwick, a soft-spoken man with steel-gray hair who still answered his own phone. Bellamy and Cross, he said. Arthur, it's Walter Hensley. He went quiet long enough that I checked whether the call had dropped. Walter, he said finally, where are you right now? In my car outside Cedar County Trust. Are you alone? He asked. It was the second time in 20 minutes someone had asked me that question. Yes, I said. Tell me exactly what happened. And I did, all of it, the balance, Helen's face, the guardianship notation, Marcus on the phone. Arthur didn't interrupt until I mentioned the trust by name. Did you know about this? I asked. Another silence, longer than the first. Yes, he said, and the word hurt worse than it had any right to. I knew Eleanor set it up. I didn't know the company shares inside it had grown the way they apparently have. After your surgery, Marcus sent me a letter terminating my services on your behalf. He told me you wanted no further contact with my office. I never said that. I told him. I know that now, Arthur said quietly. Don't go home tonight, Walter. Why not? I asked, though some part of me already knew the shape of the answer. Because Marcus has spent months, maybe years, building a case that you can no longer care for yourself, Arthur said. A house with no heat in January is exactly the kind of evidence that helps him, whether the furnace failed on its own or not. You think he broke it? I asked. I think we assume nothing and document everything, Arthur said. Come to my office, park behind the building. I'll have a locksmith meet us at your house afterward, and a licensed inspector to look at that furnace before anyone touches it again. We need facts before Marcus gets the chance to manufacture more of them. Arthur's office hadn't changed in 9 years. The same brass lamp sat on the same desk. The same framed photograph showed him and Eleanor's father holding walleye beside a lake I couldn't name anymore. He locked the door behind me and took my coat without a word, then poured coffee from a machine in the corner, his hand trembling slightly as he set the cup down. You're frightened, I said. I'm angry at Marcus, he said, and at myself. Eleanor asked me to serve as trust protector years ago. I declined because I was easing into retirement and recommended a corporate fiduciary instead. I kept copies of the original documents out of habit more than foresight. When Marcus cut off contact, I accepted what I believed was your decision far too easily. He opened a fireproof cabinet and lifted out a thick blue binder. The Eleanor Reyes Hensley Irrevocable Family Trust was stamped across the cover in gold. Seeing her full maiden name printed there closed my throat. Before we open this, Arthur said, I need to ask you a few questions Marcus's attorney is going to ask eventually. What day is it? Friday, the 11th of December. Who's the sitting governor? I answered. What did you eat for breakfast? Oatmeal with raisins and half a grapefruit. How did you get to my office? East on County Road 9, onto Chestnut. Parked behind the building beside a delivery van missing its left taillight. Arthur's mouth twitched, the closest thing to a smile he'd shown all day. Any falls in the last year? No. Missed medications? No. Any memory diagnosis, ever? No. Then we schedule an independent evaluation immediately, he said. Not your regular doctor. Dr. Okafor's treated me for 18 years, I said. And who schedules your appointments with him? Arthur asked. I already knew the answer. Marcus did Eleanor had come from money, though nobody meeting the two of us would ever have guessed it. Her father, Franklin Reyes, had started with a small machine shop making precision valves and turned it, over 30 years, into Reyes Precision Instruments, a respected regional manufacturer. Eleanor had owned a minority block of non-voting shares from the day her father died. We lived on my railroad salary and reinvested every dividend without touching a dollar of it. She used to say the shares were for old age, for emergencies, and for the children after we were both gone. The trust held those shares. While Eleanor lived, she controlled them outright. After her death, I became the sole lifetime beneficiary, and the trust could pay for my housing, health, education, maintenance, and general welfare. Whatever remained after my death would be divided equally between Marcus and Claire, I repeated. Marcus told me your mother left Claire almost nothing because of what she did. Arthur looked up sharply. What do you believe Claire did? She tried to pressure Eleanor into changing the trust while she was sick, I said. Marcus showed me the emails. Claire called him a thief. Did you ever ask Claire about any of this yourself? Arthur asked. She refused to explain herself, I said, or somebody made sure she never got the chance. The coffee had gone bitter in my mouth by the time Arthur reached the incapacity section. The corporate trustee could appoint a distribution advisor if 2 independent physicians certified that I lacked capacity. Marcus was named as first nominee. Claire was named second. Any advisor who concealed material information, acted in bad faith, or self-dealt would be permanently removed, and if that advisor was also a remainder beneficiary, he would be treated as having predeceased me for purposes of inheritance. Eleanor insisted on that clause, Arthur said. She'd watched cousins tear each other apart over her father's estate and swore it would never happen to hers. A hard knock landed on the office door. Arthur and I looked at each other. The knock came again, sharper. Walter Hensley, a man called through the wood. Arthur crossed to the window overlooking the street, looked down, and came back with his jaw set. Process server, he said. That was fast. Marcus set this in motion before today. He opened the door. A young man in a navy parka asked my name, handed me a thick envelope, and recited that I had been formally served, looking almost apologetic, as though he already knew what was inside. The petition ran 30 pages. Marcus alleged progressive cognitive decline, financial confusion, paranoia, unsafe driving, medication errors, and an inability to maintain my residence. He asked for emergency temporary guardianship, authority over my medical decisions, and the power to relocate me into supervised housing. Attached were photographs, peeling paint on my back porch, a scorched kettle, a box of unopened mail, a thermostat reading 44 degrees, time-stamped that very morning. He was in my house while I was sitting in that bank, I said. Arthur studied the timestamp. You said Denise was with him. That's what he told me on the phone, I said. Another attachment showed a video still from the hospital, 9 years old. Me disoriented after the bypass, calling Marcus by my late brother's name and asking twice for Eleanor, forgetting for a few merciful seconds that she was already gone. I remembered that morning. Tubes in my chest, morphine thick in my veins. Marcus had stood at the foot of the bed with his phone held low, and I had assumed at the time he was updating Claire. He kept that recording for 9 years, I said quietly. Arthur's jaw tightened. The hearing's set for Monday morning, he said. He's requesting emergency authority this afternoon, without prior notice, but service still buys us a response window. 3 days before anyone can move me out of my own house, I said. They can't simply take you, Arthur said. The petition claims otherwise, if a judge grants it. Arthur didn't comfort me with a lie. A 72-year-old widower alone in a freezing house, a video of post-operative confusion, and a son swearing under oath that his father is in danger. A judge might grant limited temporary authority just to get everyone through the weekend, he admitted. The heating inspector met us at my house at 4:30. His name was Raphael, broad-shouldered, oil under his fingernails, with no patience whatsoever for mysteries a screwdriver could solve. Arthur filmed from the doorway while Raphael opened the furnace panel. Within 5 minutes, he held up a small copper safety switch. This was disconnected, he said flatly. Could it come loose on its own? Arthur asked. Not like this, Raphael said. The retaining clip was removed and set aside inside the cabinet. Not lost, not knocked free. Somebody knew enough to shut the unit down clean without damaging a thing. My son sells commercial real estate, I said. He wouldn't know a pilot light from a fuse box. Denise's younger brother runs a property maintenance company, I added, though I didn't say it out loud just then. Facts first, Arthur had told me, and I intended to hold to it. Raphael reconnected the switch. Warm air began moving through the vents within minutes. Nothing had ever been wrong with that furnace except a hand that knew exactly where to reach. Arthur had a locksmith change every lock in the house before dark. We photographed each room, the full refrigerator, my labeled medication organizer, the clean stovetop, the folder, where I kept every paid utility bill filed by month. The unopened mail from Marcus's photograph turned out to have been pulled straight from my recycling bin, mostly advertising circulars. On the kitchen table sat a cream-colored envelope I had not placed there myself. Cedarview Senior Residences was embossed across the front. Inside was an admission contract with a room already reserved for Monday afternoon, a monthly fee of $8,800, and a payment authorization drawn against the Eleanor Reyes Hensley Family Trust. They intended to use my own wife's money to lock me away. Arthur read the fine print aloud. "There's a non-refundable community fee of $22,000 already marked paid," he said. "Can the trust pay that without telling me?" Apparently it did, I said. I lowered myself into Eleanor's old kitchen chair. She had chosen that oak table when Marcus was 9 and Claire was 6. The children had done their homework there. Eleanor had rolled pie crust on that same surface 1,000 times. After she got sick, we sat there some nights and pretended not to be afraid. The house wasn't grand. A 2-story craftsman with green shutters and a porch I'd rebuilt with my own hands the summer Marcus turned 12. Eleanor had used her first large dividend check to pay off the mortgage outright and called it the safest investment we would ever make. Now Marcus's petition described that same house as a deteriorating property I irrationally refused to abandon. "Why now?" I asked Arthur. "He's controlled that trust for years. Why the sudden rush?" Arthur laid the admission contract beside the guardianship petition and studied them both. "Because something changed," he said. My phone rang again. Helen this time. "Mr. Hensley, I'm sorry to call after hours," she said, "but our compliance officer flagged an instruction submitted yesterday. It requests a distribution of $4.6 million to acquire a commercial property. The paperwork claims the property will provide long-term housing and income for you personally." "What property?" I asked. "A former motel outside Fenwick," she said. "The purchasing entity is MDH Living Holdings. Marcus, Denise, Hensley," Arthur said, before she could spell it out. Helen went quiet a moment, then continued. "There's more, Mr. Hensley. The trust has paid a consulting company called Bridgeview Care Solutions roughly $29,000 a month for the last 7 years. The memo lines say property oversight, beneficiary support, care coordination. Who owns it?" I asked, already certain of the answer. "Public filings list Denise Hensley as managing member," Helen said. $29,000 a month for 7 years came to well over $2 million, and Denise visited me perhaps twice a month, usually for less than an hour, mostly to reorder my prescriptions online and argue with the cable company on my behalf, while reminding me how grateful I ought to feel. "Can you send everything to my attorney?" I asked. "Once I have your signed authorization," Helen said, "I'll have the forms ready first thing tomorrow. I'll be there when the branch opens." After the call, Arthur sat across from me without speaking for a long moment. "This may become a criminal matter, Walter," he finally said. "He's my son," I said. "I taught him to ride a bicycle in that driveway. I sat up 2 nights running when he had pneumonia as a boy. When he wrecked his first car, I worked overtime for half a year to help replace it." Arthur waited. "And he disconnected my furnace," I said. "We don't know that for certain yet," Arthur said gently. "No," I said. "We only know he photographed the result before I'd even gotten home." Arthur pointed to an address listed under interested parties in the petition, a street in Cedar Hollow I didn't recognize. "Do you want me to reach out to her?" he asked. I thought of my daughter at 28, standing on our porch the week after Eleanor's funeral, her face swollen from crying. Marcus behind me with one hand on my shoulder while I told her I'd seen the emails, that I couldn't bear one more lie from her. She had kept saying, "Dad, please, just let me show you." I had closed the door instead. That was the last time I'd laid eyes on her. "No," I told Arthur. Then I corrected myself. "I need to go tonight. If she'll even see me." Claire lived in a small brick duplex near the community college in Cedar Hollow. A paper snowflake hung crooked in the front window. A child's bicycle leaned against the porch rail beside a blue hatchback in the drive. I didn't know she had children, I said. Arthur cut the engine. One son, he said. Eli, 7 years old. I stared at him. You knew? She called my office after he was born, Arthur admitted. Asked whether I thought you'd accept a photograph if she mailed one. Did she send it? I asked. She did, Arthur said. I never received it, I said. Arthur looked toward the lit window. I believe you, he said quietly. The porch light came on before we reached the steps. A small face appeared behind the glass, saw two gray-haired strangers, and vanished. Then the door opened and Claire stood there. 44 now, though in my memory she had frozen at 36. Her dark hair was shorter than I remembered, threaded with silver at the temples. She had Eleanor's eyes exactly, and for a moment neither of us moved at all. Dad, she said. I had rehearsed a dozen explanations on the drive over. None of them survived the sound of that single word. I was wrong, I said. Her hand tightened on the doorframe. I was wrong about you, I went on. I don't yet know how wrong, but enough that I should have come years ago. She looked past me at Arthur. What happened? She asked. Marcus filed for guardianship, Arthur said. Your father found a trust the bank never told him existed. All the color drained out of her face at once. She pulled us both inside and locked the door behind us. The boy watched us from the hallway, dinosaur pajamas, one bare foot rubbing against the other. Claire knelt toward him. Eli, this is your grandfather, she said. Eli studied me with open curiosity rather than fear. The trains, he said. Mom says you can fix anything with wheels. Something in my chest seemed to stop and start again at once. You told him about me, I asked. Claire's eyes filled. I told him the good parts, she said. Eli came closer and held out a model locomotive missing one wheel, offering it the way children offer things when they've already decided you belong to them. Most things, I managed to say, my voice cracking on the second word. He handed it over as if we'd met for exactly that purpose. Claire sent him upstairs to read, promising she'd check on him soon, then led Arthur and me to a small dining room where papers covered one end of the table. Bank statements, printed emails, certified mail receipts, photographs, all arranged in labeled folders, like evidence someone had spent years preparing for a trial she wasn't sure would ever happen. You kept all of it, Arthur said. I knew someday he'd go too far, Claire said, not looking at me. I just didn't know whether Dad would still be alive when it happened. I deserved the sentence. I let it land without flinching. She opened a red folder and slid several printed emails toward me. The first appeared to be from her to Marcus, dated 2 weeks before Eleanor died. Mom isn't thinking clearly. Get Dad out of the room and make her sign the shares over to me. He'll waste everything if we let him. It was the exact email Marcus had shown me the week after the funeral, the one that had let me close a door on my own daughter. Claire set another page beside it. This is the version from my sent folder, she said, verified by the email provider during an earlier investigation. Marcus, Mom is frightened and medicated. Stop asking her to sign anything. Dad needs to be in the room and Arthur should review every document. I don't care what happens to the shares. I care that nobody pressures her while she's dying. The timestamps matched exactly. The message was nearly identical to the one I'd been shown, except 2 characters had been changed. He built a look-alike address, I said slowly, and forwarded the altered version to himself. He did it with 3 separate emails, Claire said. Why didn't you show me this years ago? I asked. Her control cracked for the first time. I tried, she said. She pulled out a certified mail envelope stamped refused. My address printed on the front, Marcus's handwriting marking it returned to sender, recipient declines. Another had been mailed to the rehabilitation center after my surgery and came back marked patient discharged, though I'd remained there 12 more days. She showed me phone logs, 41 calls over 6 months, most lasting under 5 seconds. Marcus had placed her number on the blocked list of the phone plan he managed on my behalf. I came to the house 4 times, Claire said. Once Denise told me you were asleep. Twice nobody answered at all. The last time, Marcus met me in the driveway and told me you'd call the police if I set foot on the porch again. Why did you stop trying? I asked. The anger in her eyes gave way to something closer to exhaustion. Because I was pregnant, Dad, and my husband had just left, and I was working 2 jobs to keep the lights on. Every time I tried to reach you, Marcus found a new way to punish me for it. He called my employer and accused me of financially exploiting a vulnerable adult. He contacted my landlord. He told Mom's relatives I had a pill problem. I never believed that last part, I said. You believed enough, she said quietly. Yes, I admitted. The house was silent except for the furnace and the faint creak of Eli moving around upstairs. I need to understand what happened with the trust, I said. About 3 months after your surgery, Claire said, I got a notice naming Marcus temporary distribution advisor. I objected because the trust required 2 independent physicians to certify incapacity, and one of the 2 letters was supposedly from a neurologist. I called his office. They had never treated you in their lives. Did you tell the trustee? Arthur asked. I sent everything to Heritage Fiduciary, Claire said. Their compliance officer opened a review. 2 weeks later, she was let go during a merger, and Marcus told her replacement I was a disgruntled remainder beneficiary trying to seize control. Then he produced the altered emails as proof. Why didn't you sue? I asked. With what money? Claire said. Marcus had Mom's estate attorneys, the trust company's lawyers, and a signed statement claiming you wanted no contact with me at all. I never signed that, I said. Claire opened another folder and slid across a single page bearing my name. I request that Claire Hensley sees no further information regarding my finances or medical condition. Her continued interference causes me significant distress. The signature resembled mine, but the H leaned too far to the right. Arthur held it up to the lamp. This can likely be traced against another document, he said. I reported suspected forgery to Adult Protective Services, Claire said. A caseworker actually visited you. Marcus was present the entire time. The case was closed after you told her you trusted him completely. I remembered that visit now. A woman asking gently whether anyone controlled my finances against my wishes, Marcus making coffee at the very table we now sat around, and me laughing and telling her my son was the only reason my bills ever got paid on time. My own voice had closed the door Claire had spent years trying to pry open. I'm sorry, I said. She crossed her arms. That doesn't give me back 8 years, she said. It doesn't give Eli a grandfather at his kindergarten play. It doesn't give me Mom's last Christmas. You made me leave before dessert because Marcus said I was upsetting her. I closed my eyes. Eleanor had asked where Claire had gone that night. I told her Claire had chosen work over family. Eleanor had turned her face to the window and said nothing else for the rest of the evening. No, I whispered, it doesn't restore any of it. Claire's voice softened only slightly. Then why are you here tonight? She asked. Because Marcus is trying to have me declared incompetent, I said. Because he hid your mother's trust from both of us. Because I need the truth, wherever it leads. I looked at the folders spread across the table, then at my daughter. But even if none of this were happening tonight, I should have come years ago. I should have listened to you before I listened to papers that confirmed what I already feared. What did you fear? She asked. That after your mother died, there'd be no family left unless I held on tight to the child who stayed closest, I said. Claire looked away. I chose the one who made me dependent, I said, and I punished the one who asked me to stand on my own feet. A long silence passed between us. Then Eli appeared in the doorway holding the broken locomotive. Can you fix the wheel now? He asked. Claire wiped her cheek. Not tonight, honey, she started to say. I held out my hand instead. May I see it? I asked. He crossed the room and set it in my palm. The plastic axle had slipped free of its shallow groove. I used the tip of Arthur's pocket knife to guide it back into place, and Eli rolled the little engine across the table. Watching it move perfectly, he grinned up at his mother. Told you, he said. Claire looked at me, her expression caught somewhere between grief and something more cautious than hope. You can stay for coffee, she said. Then we worked. We worked past midnight. Claire had spent years assembling fragments of a story she'd never been allowed to see whole, and Helen's records began filling in the gaps by the next morning. Arthur, Claire, and I met her at the bank before the branch had even opened, escorted by a security guard through a side entrance to a conference room on the second floor. Helen had brought in the bank's trust compliance officer, a careful man who introduced himself, apologized for what he still couldn't disclose, and then said something I respected more than he probably realized. Our acquisition doesn't erase our responsibility, he told us. If a predecessor institution failed you, we've inherited the duty to correct it. He placed 3 binders on the table. The first traced the trust's growth. When Eleanor died, the Reyes Precision shares had been valued at roughly $3 million. 2 years later, a national manufacturer had acquired the company outright, and the cash and stock from that sale flowed into the trust. Strong investments and a rising market had done the rest. At its peak, the account had held nearly $29 million. The second binder listed distributions. The trust had legitimately covered my medical premiums, my property taxes, a handful of household bills. But buried beneath those ordinary expenses were payments I'd never seen or approved. Bridgeview Care Solutions had received over $2.4 million in monthly fees across 7 years. MDH Living Holdings had received $850,000 as a housing development advance. A Fenwick dealership had been paid $126,000 for 2 vehicles described as beneficiary transportation, neither of which I had ever once driven. A private country club had collected $78,000 in dues filed under social wellness. There were luxury travel charges labeled family-supported respite, while I stayed home reheating soup, and Marcus and Denise vacationed in Portugal, Costa Rica, and a resort somewhere in the Caribbean, all justified as expenses related to my care. The third binder held quarterly advisor certifications. Every 3 months, Marcus had signed a statement swearing that each distribution served my welfare and that no conflict of interest existed. His signature appeared 81 times. I turned every single page. Anger urged me to look away. I made myself keep reading instead because anger had already cost me enough years. How much did they take? I finally asked. The compliance officer folded his hands. Direct payments to entities tied to Marcus or Denise total at least $3.4 million, he said, and that excludes transactions still under review. The proposed $4.6 million transaction never settled. Why did the corporate trustee approve any of it? Claire asked. Documentation on file stated Mr. Hensley was incapacitated and living under his son's full-time supervision, the officer said. Bridgeview submitted monthly care reports. Helen slid one across the table. It described meal preparation, bathing assistance, transportation to medical appointments, home safety monitoring, daily cognitive exercises. According to Denise, I required help dressing and could not be left alone for more than 2 hours at a stretch. On many of the listed dates, she had not come near my house at all. Who verified these reports? Arthur asked. A trust officer named Gerald Combs approved most of the distributions, Helen said. He left the predecessor company 18 months ago. Any relationship to your son or daughter-in-law? Arthur asked. We're examining that now, the compliance officer said. Claire pointed to a line in one report. It says here Dad moved permanently into Marcus's home 8 years ago in March. I stayed there 17 days after cardiac rehab, I said. That's it. Our file lists that as your permanent address, the officer admitted. My driver's license, my tax filings, my voter registration, all say otherwise, I said. Yes, he said, looking genuinely uncomfortable for the first time. They do. Helen opened a smaller folder. This is the original incapacity certification, she said. The first letter came from your cardiologist 6 days after surgery. It stated you were temporarily unable to manage complex decisions while hospitalized and under narcotic pain medication. Temporary was underlined twice. The second letter came from a neurologist named Dr. Alan Preston. It claimed you suffered from probable vascular dementia and would not regain independent capacity. I've never met a Dr. Preston in my life, I said. Claire tapped the letterhead. This phone number belongs to an answering service, she said. I called it years ago and got nowhere. Arthur examined the notary block. This signature needs forensic review, he said. There's no record of annual recertification, Helen added, even though the trust explicitly required one. Mr. Combs entered a permanent status code into the system right after the merger closed. So one forged letter and one temporary letter erased me for 9 years, I said. Nobody answered. The proposed hotel purchase sat in a separate file. MDH Living planned to convert a failing roadside motel outside Fenwick into an assisted living facility called Cedar View Residences. An independent appraisal valued the property at $1.9 million. The trust had been asked to pay $4.6 million for it. purchased from a seller connected to Denise's brother. Marcus's plan would have paid his own family nearly 2.5 times the property's worth, then build my trust for the privilege of housing me inside it. This is why he needs the guardianship now, Arthur said. Closing is set for Monday. If he can't produce proof of authority, the seller may walk, or worse, expose the arrangement publicly on his own. The compliance officer slid a form toward me. Mr. Hensley, this authorizes us to suspend all distributions except essential direct expenses while we investigate, he said. You have the right to sign it once you understand exactly what it does. I read every line, explained it back to him in my own words, and signed. Helen watched closely the entire time. She was already thinking like a witness. One more thing, she said. At 11:40 last night, someone attempted to access your online banking profile from an IP address associated with Bridgeview Care Solutions. The password was changed, but the multi-factor code went to a phone number ending in digits that match your son's. Were they successful? I asked. No, Helen said. We disabled electronic access the moment your fraud report was filed. My phone buzzed with 6 messages from Marcus. Dad, I know you're confused. Arthur is manipulating you. Claire has always wanted Mom's money. Please come home so we can talk privately. You're putting the whole family at risk. If you love us, don't do anything until Sunday dinner. That last line stayed lit on my screen longer than the rest. If you love us. Marcus had learned to turn love into a debt only he got to calculate. There is no Sunday dinner, Claire said, reading over my shoulder. I put the phone away. There will be, Arthur said slowly. He wants you at his table because he thinks a table makes him look like a son instead of an advisor who stole from his own beneficiary. Let him believe it's working, I said. That's dangerous, Arthur warned. Then we make it useful, I said. Claire studied me. You want him to talk, she asked. For 9 years, I said. Everyone else has been speaking for me. I want to hear what he says while he still believes he can. Arthur found a sealed letter tucked in the back of the trust binder that afternoon, not legally binding, labeled guidance for my family, with instructions for the trustee to release copies after Eleanor's death. Heritage's file showed it had been mailed to Marcus's address while I was still in rehab. No copy had ever reached Claire or me. Arthur asked whether I wanted him to read it aloud. He'll read it, I said. Eleanor's handwriting had always leaned slightly left, as though every word resisted being rushed. My dear Walter, if you're reading this, then I've left you with the one task I most wanted to share with you. Growing old, I'm sorry for that. I know you'll be tempted to give the children whatever they ask, because generosity feels easier than loneliness. Please remember, our love was never by what we surrendered. It was measured by what we built together. The shares in this trust came from my father, but their purpose belongs to us. Use them to live freely. Fix the porch. Travel if the mood ever strikes you. Buy that ridiculous fishing boat you always pretended not to want. Help the children when help makes them stronger, never when it teaches them to use you. Marcus has ambition and charm. Claire has courage and a tongue that runs faster than her patience. Neither one is loved more. Neither should ever control the other. If one tries to turn you against the other, stop and demand proof in the same room, together. Secrets grow in the space families leave when they refuse to sit down together. I've written strict provisions into this trust because grief makes good people vulnerable, and frightened people are easy to direct. If anyone ever claims you can't speak for yourself, I want your voice sought first, loudly, and in person. Most of all, Walter, don't confuse peace with silence. We had a good marriage because you finally learned how to argue with me. Keep arguing for your own life. Always yours, Eleanor. I finished, folded the letter along its old creases, and sat very still. Claire had turned toward the window. Arthur took off his glasses and polished them, though they were already clean. She knew us, Claire said quietly, better than we knew ourselves. At noon, Arthur drove me to an independent geriatric specialist at University Hospital. The examination ran nearly 3 hours, memory tests, reasoning exercises, a medication review, a driving safety interview. The doctor asked me to recall 5 words, draw a clock, explain compound interest, and describe the trust dispute in my own words. When he finished, he folded his hands. Mr. Hensley, he said, you show normal age-related slowing and mild difficulty with delayed recall. You do not meet the criteria for dementia or impaired decision-making capacity. Put that in plain language for a judge, I said. He smiled. I intend to. And the hospital video, Arthur asked. Post-operative delirium is extremely common after cardiac surgery, the doctor said. A short recording made while a patient is heavily medicated tells you nothing meaningful about that same person's capacity 9 years later. The written report would be ready by Sunday morning. We returned to Arthur's office to find a courier waiting with a letter from Marcus's attorney. It demanded I cease all contact with the bank, surrender my car keys, and submit to an evaluation performed by a physician of Marcus's choosing. It also warned Arthur that continued communication with me might constitute undue influence. Arthur read it twice. He's trying to turn every person who supports you into evidence that you're being manipulated, he said. Can he actually do that? I asked. He can allege it, Arthur said. Courts hear that argument often in contested guardianships. Claire paced beside the bookshelf. Then Helen, the inspector, and the doctor will all need to testify eventually, she said. Monday's hearing may be brief, Arthur said. The judge may only decide whether temporary protection is warranted while a full case proceeds. What if she appoints Marcus anyway? I asked. We'll ask for a neutral professional instead, Arthur said. Even a neutral guardian would limit your choices, though, and Marcus would use the delay to keep pressuring the bank. Likely, Arthur admitted. My phone rang. Denise this time. I answered on speaker after Arthur nodded. Walter. Her voice was soft, tearful, rehearsed. Thank God. We've been so worried sick. I'm fine, I said. Claire didn't take me anywhere. I went on my own. You know she isn't safe, Denise said. Claire stopped pacing. What makes her unsafe? I asked. Her history, Denise said. The accusations. The way she upset your wife. Be specific, I said. Denise hesitated. This is exactly what the doctors warned us about, Walter. When you get agitated, you fixate. Which doctors? I asked. Please, Walter. We love you. Then withdraw the petition, I said. She exhaled shakily. We can't. Not while you're making financial decisions you clearly don't understand, like stopping the purchase of an old motel for $4.6 million. The line went silent for a moment. When Denise spoke again, the tears had vanished entirely. Who told you about that? She asked. Is the hotel meant for me? I asked. It's an investment, Walter. Marcus has spent 2 years building a safe place for seniors. You'd have had a private suite, medical support, everything. The appraisal says it's worth $1.9 million, I said. Appraisals vary, she snapped. And the seller happens to be your brother's company, Arthur added. Family connections don't make a transaction improper, Denise said. Hiding them does, Arthur replied. She lowered her voice to something almost gentle, and far more frightening for it. You need to be very careful, Walter. Marcus has protected you from information that would overwhelm you. If you force everything into the open, you may not like what you find. Is that a threat? I asked. It's concern, she said. It always is, I said, and ended the call. Arthur had recorded it. In our state, a single participating party could legally record a phone conversation, and I had been that party. Claire looked shaken. She knew exactly how to talk to you, she said, because I taught her what worked without ever meaning to. What do you mean? I asked. Whenever she said she was worried, I stopped asking questions, I admitted. I wanted to be a gracious father-in-law. After your mother died, I was grateful Denise still included me in anything at all. I thought of every holiday she'd organized, every restaurant reservation, every birthday card signed from all of us, and admired her efficiency for it. Now I wondered how many of those dinners I had unknowingly paid for myself. Arthur picked Eleanor's letter back up. There's a stronger provision buried in the trust, he said. Article 11. If an advisor acts in bad faith, conceals the trust from its beneficiary, or uses trust property for personal gain, that advisor is removed outright. If the advisor also happens to be a remainder beneficiary, he's treated as having predeceased you, which means Marcus inherits nothing at all from this trust. But only after due process, Arthur cautioned. Either the corporate trustee or a court has to formally find bad faith. Does Marcus know he was actually named the operative trust instrument? I asked. Claire shook her head. He probably assumes nobody can ever prove intent, she said. Every payment is labeled as your care. I looked once more at Eleanor's letter. Help the children when help makes them stronger, not when it teaches them to use you. Then Sunday dinner isn't about making him confess to theft, I said. It's about making him explain why he thought I never deserved to know the truth. Arthur understood immediately. 81 signed certifications already show us the money, he said. You want his own words to show us the choice behind it. Marcus's house stood on a private lane above the Fenwick Golf Club, limestone columns, a heated driveway, windows tall enough for a church. He'd once told me the mortgage was crushing him, and I'd given him $40,000 from what I believed was my last remaining investment account to help with the down payment. The trust accounting showed the house had actually been purchased outright with no mortgage at all. Arthur objected to my going alone. Claire objected louder. We compromised. I wore a small recorder clipped inside my shirt. Arthur waited at a diner 6 minutes away. Claire stayed home with Eli. If I hadn't called by 8:30, Arthur would come for me himself. I arrived at 6. Denise opened the door before I'd even reached it, wearing a cream sweater and an expression of exhausted devotion. "Oh, Walter," she said, pulling me into an embrace. One hand sweeping briefly across my back near the recorder, too small to feel through a winter coat. "Come in. You must be freezing." Marcus stood near the fireplace looking exactly as he had at 35, confident, composed, handsome in the particular way that invites trust before it's earned. A bottle of my favorite bourbon sat open on the bar cart. "Dad," he said, approaching slowly, as though I were something that might bolt. "I'm glad you came. You asked me to," I said. "I've been calling." "I know," I said. He glanced toward the driveway. "Did Claire drive you here?" "I drove myself," I said. His smile tightened. "Your license may be temporarily suspended if the court grants the petition," he said. "Then I should enjoy it while I still can," I said. Denise laughed a beat too quickly. "Let's not talk about court before dinner," she said. The table was set for 3 with Eleanor's silver candlesticks, which I hadn't laid eyes on since her funeral. "Those belong to your mother," I said. Marcus followed my gaze. "You gave us some things when you downsized, Dad," he said. "I never downsized," I said. "After the surgery," he said gently, "you don't always remember things the way they happened." It was a small lie set against millions of dollars, but it carried the entire design inside it. Every objection I raised simply became further proof of my decline. I sat. "Maybe you can remind me," I said. Dinner began with roast beef and wine. Denise refilled my glass twice before I'd finished half of it. I switched to water. For 20 minutes they performed an ordinary family evening, Marcus describing a commercial listing, Denise complaining about holiday traffic, both of them asking whether I'd slept well and taken my evening medication. Nobody mentioned the trust at all. Finally, I set down my fork. "Why did you tell me your mother's estate was gone?" I asked. Marcus looked at Denise, then back at me. "It's complicated, Dad. Make it simple," I said. "Mom's shares went into a trust. You were in no condition to manage it. 9 years ago," I said. "Your condition never improved the way we hoped," he said. "I live alone, I drive, I cook. I volunteer at the Rail Museum. I file my own taxes," I said. "With help," he said. "Whose idea was the $29,000 monthly fee to Denise's company?" I asked. Denise's face hardened. Marcus placed a hand over hers. "Bridgeview coordinates your care," he said. "Name 3 services it performed last month," I said. "This isn't an audit, Dad. It is, at my table." Marcus leaned back. "This is our table," he said. There it was, not anger. Ownership. Plain and unashamed, I let the silence stretch out. "When did you decide I no longer deserved the truth?" I asked. "Dad, you were broken after Mom died," he said. "You couldn't open your own mail. You called me crying in the middle of the night." "I was grieving," I said. "You were incapable," he said. "For how long?" I asked. He rubbed his forehead. "This is exactly why we never told you the balance," he said. "You'd fixate on the number. You'd start giving it all away." "To whom?" I asked. "Claire," he said. "The trust belongs equally to both of you after I die," I said. "On paper," he said. "What does that mean?" I asked. Denise cut in. "Claire abandoned you, Walter. Marcus gave up years of his life. At $29,000 a month," I said. "Do you have any idea what professional care actually costs?" she snapped. "Do you know how many appointments, emergencies, and late-night calls we handled?" "I had 3 medical appointments all last year," I said. "I scheduled 2 of them myself." Marcus's voice dropped low. "Enough," he said. "No," I said. "Not yet. Did you alter Claire's emails?" He looked straight at me. "She's poisoning you," he said. Did you block her number? She was harassing you, he said. Did you write a letter using my name telling Arthur to stay away? You asked me to, he said. Did I? For the first time, Marcus lost his composure entirely. He struck the table with his palm, and the silverware jumped. You begged me to make it all stop, he said. Mom was dead. You were useless. Claire was threatening lawsuits. Bills were everywhere. I held this entire family together while you sat in that house talking to a woman who wasn't even there anymore. The words hung over the table like smoke. I remembered speaking to Eleanor after she died. Sometimes I still did. Grief was never evidence against me. It was only ever evidence that I had loved someone completely. So you lied, I said quietly. Marcus stood and walked to the fireplace. I made decisions, he said. Someone had to. And when I recovered, I said, you didn't let me recover, according to a neurologist I've never once met. His shoulders went rigid. Dr. Preston, I said. Do you remember him? Denise, this conversation is over, Marcus said. Sit down, he told her. She stared at him, then slowly lowered herself back into her chair. Marcus turned to face me fully. The trust company needed documentation, he said. The cardiologist's letter alone wasn't enough. So where did the second letter come from? I asked. A consultant arranged the evaluation, he said. There was no evaluation, I said. You don't remember it, Dad. Convenient, I said. His face flushed. Do you actually think the bank will hand you $26 million because you walked in asking for a furnace loan? He said. There will be hearings, experts, years of litigation. Every strange thing you've ever done will end up public record. Every name you forgot, every time you got turned around in a parking lot, every conversation you had with a dead woman. You recorded me in a hospital bed, I said. I recorded your condition, he said. You were preparing even then. I was protecting this family, he said. I looked around the enormous room, the imported stone, my late wife's candlesticks glowing under the chandelier. You protected it very comfortably, I said. Denise slid a folder across from the empty chair beside her. There's a way to end all of this without hurting anyone, she said. Inside were 4 documents. The first authorized my voluntary admission to Cedarview Senior Residences. The second confirmed Marcus as my permanent financial agent. The third released Bridgeview Care Solutions from all claims. The fourth authorized the bank to approve the hotel investment. You brought me here to sign these, I said. We brought you here to keep you out of a courtroom, Denise said. Marcus sat beside me and lowered his voice. If the judge appoints a stranger, he said, that stranger controls where you live. Legal fees drain the trust dry. Claire keeps fighting until nobody has anything left at all. Sign tonight. And nothing changes except you move somewhere warm and safe. Nothing changes, I repeated. You'll have the best suite at Cedarview, he said. We'll visit every week. You visit me twice a month now because I'm difficult, I said. He said it so gently that it made the lie worse. I picked up the pen. Marcus and Denise exchanged a glance. I want one change, I said. The trust pays Claire $200,000 to stop challenging any of this. Marcus's shoulders eased with visible relief. We can discuss that later, Dad. Put it in writing, I said. Tonight is about your care, he said. Then I won't sign, I said. Denise stood abruptly. For God's sake, Walter. After everything we've done for you. Marcus held up a hand. Fine, he said. We'll draft a separate distribution request right now. He disappeared into his study and returned with a laptop, Denise hovering behind him as he typed. I turned the 4 original documents to their signature pages. My old foreman on the railroad used to say, a man never signs a safety inspection he hasn't personally performed. A signature is a piece of your life, he'd tell every new hire. Don't leave it somewhere another man can spend it. I wrote Walter Hensfeld instead of Walter Hensley across every line, disguising the middle letters with a small confident flourish. From across a table, under soft light, it looked exactly like my real signature. It invalidated every document in that folder. Marcus printed the distribution request, promising Claire $200,000 in exchange for a waiver she'd never actually signed. I signed that one the same way. He gathered the papers immediately. I'd like copies, I said. Our attorney will send them tonight, he said. Denise moved toward me. You look tired, Walter, and you're standing between me and the door, she said. She stopped there. Marcus looked between the two of us, and for just a moment I saw real fear cross his face, not concern for my health, but fear that I understood exactly what room I was standing in. He walked me to the front door himself and made copies at a small printer in the hall. "You made the right choice tonight, Dad," he said, hand on my shoulder. "Did I?" I asked. "Once the hotel closes, everything stabilizes," he said. "You'll see." "And the bank hold?" I asked. His fingers tightened slightly. "The court order resolves that tomorrow," he said. "You sound certain," I said. "I have the truth," he said. I looked at my son, the boy I had once taught never to cheat even when nobody was watching. "So do I said. I drove away at 8:17. Arthur was waiting in the diner parking lot. I handed him the copies and the recorder. "Did you sign?" he asked. "Walter Hensfeld signed," I said. Arthur stared at me, then laughed once in disbelief. "Eleanor used to call you that whenever she was truly angry," he said. "Marcus never once paid attention when she did." We listened to the recording together in his car. The clearest moment came when Marcus said the trust company needed documentation, and the cardiologist's letter alone wasn't enough. Not quite a confession of forgery, but proof he'd known the permanent incapacity claim required something more, and he had manufactured it anyway. Arthur stopped the recording. "This helps," he said. "Will it be enough tomorrow?" His expression sobered. "We're about to find out." The courthouse smelled of floor wax and wet wool. By 8:30 Monday morning, every bench outside the probate courtroom was full. Marcus arrived with Denise and two attorneys, dressed in a dark blue suit, carrying a leather portfolio. Denise wore no jewelry except her wedding ring. They had dressed to look burdened rather than wealthy. "Dad," Marcus said, approaching me, "you shouldn't be here. It's a hearing about my own life," I said. Arthur stepped between us. "All communication goes through counsel from here forward," he said. Marcus's attorney smiled thinly. "Mr. Bellamy, your prior representation of the trust may present a conflict," he said. "File the motion," Arthur said evenly. Claire came through the metal detector at the far end of the hall. Marcus saw her and stopped pretending to smile entirely. "You brought her," he said to me. "She brought herself," I said. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Patricia Renner, entered without ceremony and began promptly. Marcus's attorney requested emergency guardianship, arguing that recent manipulation had caused me to obstruct essential care and endanger my own assets. He played the hospital video first, my face gray and swollen on the screen, tubes across my chest. "Do you know where you are?" Marcus's younger voice asked. "Union Depot," I mumbled. "Do you know who I am?" "Charlie. Charlie was my late brother, dead since 1997. Marcus stared at the table as though the footage pained him too much to watch. His attorney then displayed the furnace photograph, the scorched kettle, the unopened mail, a short clip of me standing in my own yard 6 months earlier asking a delivery driver why he was there, cut off before it became clear the driver simply had the wrong address. "Mr. Hensley experiences moments of apparent clarity," the attorney said, "but dementia rarely presents as constant. His son has quietly covered for these lapses to preserve his father's dignity." They submitted a letter from Dr. Okafor, describing occasional forgetfulness and anxiety. Nothing resembling a diagnosis, though the attorney read every cautious phrase as if it were one. Then Marcus testified. He spoke about my grief after Eleanor's death, described finding me asleep in a chair with the front door unlocked, forgetting appointments, calling him twice in one evening with the identical question. Some of it was exaggerated, some of it was true. That combination was exactly what made him convincing. "I don't want control," he said, his voice trembling at precisely the right moment. "I want my father safe. If the court appoints someone else, I'll accept that. I simply can't stand by while people exploit his confusion." His eyes drifted toward Claire as he said it. Arthur cross-examined him first. "How much has Bridgeview Care Solutions received from the Eleanor Reyes Hensley Trust?" he asked. Marcus's attorney objected that finances lay beyond the scope of an emergency hearing. Judge Renner allowed a limited answer. Marcus said he didn't know the exact figure, that Denise managed the company directly. "More than $2 million, Arthur asked. "Possibly, over several years," Marcus admitted. "Professional care isn't cheap," he added. "Did Bridgeview provide daily bathing assistance?" Arthur asked. "Staff and contractors handled various services," Marcus said. "Name one," Arthur said. His attorney objected again. The judge told Arthur to move on. Did you know the furnace had been disabled manually? Arthur asked. Marcus's face shifted for less than a second. No, he said. How did you enter your father's home Friday morning? I keep a key for emergencies, he said. Did you open the furnace panel? Absolutely not. Did your wife? No. Did anyone acting on behalf of Bridgeview? Not to my knowledge, he said. Arthur submitted Raphael's inspection report and the photographs of the reconnected switch. Then he called the independent geriatric specialist, who testified by video and stated plainly that I possessed full decision-making capacity and showed no clinical signs of dementia. Marcus's attorney attacked the brevity of the evaluation and argued that sophisticated individuals could mask deficits during structured testing. Helen testified next, walking the court through the loan application, the account match, the fraud alert she'd personally filed. Did Mr. Hensley appear surprised to learn of the trust? Arthur asked. Profoundly, Helen said. Should the sole beneficiary of a $26 million trust be unaware it exists? Arthur asked. Objection sustained, the judge said, though the question had already landed exactly where he'd aimed it. Claire testified last. She described the forged emails, the blocked contact, the returned letters. Marcus's attorney painted her as a resentful daughter chasing an inheritance, reading aloud an old message where she'd written, "If Marcus gets away with this, I will see him in court, even if it costs me everything." You wanted control of the trust, didn't you? He asked. No, Claire said. I asked the corporate trustee to appoint an independent professional. But if your father passes away, you inherit, he pressed. Claire looked at me before she answered. I thought my father might die believing I'd betrayed my mother, she said. I wanted that lie corrected. I didn't know the trust was worth $26 million until this past Saturday. She didn't embellish. She didn't ask for sympathy. Her restraint accomplished more than anger ever could have. The judge called a recess. We waited nearly an hour in a small conference room while Arthur warned me that emergency hearings tended to favor caution. The judge may simply preserve the status quo, he said. The status quo is Marcus controlling my life, I said. I know, Arthur said. When we returned, Judge Renner spoke carefully. She found substantial evidence that I currently possessed full capacity, but also genuine concerns requiring further investigation, conflicting medical records, competing family allegations, a large trust subject to disputed claims. She denied Marcus's request for permanent authority. Then she appointed a temporary professional guardian for 14 days, limited strictly to major medical and residential decisions, and prohibited everyone, myself included, from changing my residence, selling property, or authorizing any trust distribution above $10,000 until a full hearing could be held. The order kept me out of Cedarview. It also froze the $4.6 million. But it placed a stranger between me and my own daily choices, and Marcus's attorney leaned over to whisper something that visibly relieved him. The judge hadn't removed his role as advisor outright. She'd referred that question to the trust division for separate proceedings. Outside the courtroom, Marcus caught up with me near the elevator. You see what Claire did, he said. Now a stranger controls you, even temporarily. 2 weeks is enough time to ruin everything. The hotel contract will collapse. Investors will come after us. Us, I said. He caught his own slip. The trust, he corrected quickly. I meant the trust. The elevator doors opened. You signed the consent last night, he said quietly. If you deny it now, that only proves instability. Read the signature, I told him. His confidence wavered. Hensfeld, I said. Your mother's name for me whenever I tracked mud through her clean kitchen. The doors began sliding shut between us. You tricked me, he said. No, son, I said. I finally read what you put in front of me. The temporary guardian was a woman named Nadine Cole. She visited my house that same afternoon, inspected every room, reviewed my medications, and asked me to prepare lunch while she watched from the kitchen doorway. I made grilled cheese and tomato soup. Do you usually eat like this? She asked. When someone is quietly testing whether you can make lunch, I said. You learn to answer carefully. She almost smiled. Fair enough, she said. Nadine wasn't Marcus's ally, but she was cautious by profession. She collected my car keys pending a formal driving evaluation and asked Arthur to approve any visitors in advance. I felt punished despite having won the most important part of the day. That night I stood at my living room window watching snow settle over the road. I had $26 million and no permission to drive to the grocery store. Money, I understood then, was not freedom. Control was. Marcus called at 7. Arthur advised me not to answer. I answered anyway. The motel cellar pulled out, Marcus said without a greeting. We lost the deposit. Whose deposit? I asked. Mine. Denise's brother's investors. Do you understand what you've done? Stopped you from paying nearly $5 million for a property worth under 2, I asked. It would have been worth 12 after conversion, he said. Then another buyer will be fortunate, I said. He breathed heavily. Denise's brother may end up filing for bankruptcy, he said. I'm sorry to hear that, I said. No, you're not, he said. Claire has turned you cruel. I looked at Eleanor's photograph on the mantel. Did you disconnect my furnace? I asked. What? You heard me, I said. Of course not, he said. Did Denise? This paranoia is exactly why the judge appointed Nadine. Did her brother? I asked. Marcus said nothing at all. Good night, I said. Dad, wait, he said. The bank is threatening to remove me entirely. If that happens, they can demand repayment from Bridgeview. We could lose the house. For one instant, his voice sounded young again. I remembered him at 16, admitting he'd dented a neighbor's car, standing in my workshop with tears in his eyes, offering every dollar he'd earned that summer to fix it. Tell the truth, I said. Return what you took. That's where you begin. You think it's that simple? He asked. No, I said. I think it was simple 9 years ago. He hung up. The story hit the local news by morning. Redery's fortune becomes center of family capacity fight. The article quoted an unnamed source, describing an elderly father manipulated by an estranged daughter after learning of an unexpected inheritance. It painted Marcus as a devoted caregiver and mentioned my post-operative confusion at length. By noon, 2 television vans sat parked near the courthouse. Arthur suspected a public relations consultant had planted the story, though we couldn't prove it. At the Rail Museum, where I volunteered every Wednesday restoring old signal equipment, the director gently suggested I take some time away, just until things settled. A neighbor brought a casserole and stayed only 5 minutes because a camera crew waited across the street. My private grief had become public entertainment overnight. Claire fared worse. Anonymous messages called her a gold digger. Someone posted her employer's address online. The community college placed her on paid leave while it reviewed whether the publicity would affect her counseling role. I'm sorry, I told her over the phone. Stop apologizing for what he does, she said. Then help me end it, I said. That afternoon, Helen called with news that felt like another setback. The former trust officer, Gerald Combs, had died 11 months earlier. The man who had approved most of Marcus's requests could no longer testify to any of it. Bank archives showed several original supporting documents had been destroyed under a routine retention schedule after digitization, including the envelope and transmission record for the forged neurologist's letter, though the letter itself survived. Dr. Preston turned out to be a real physician who had retired and relocated overseas years earlier. His former office had no record of ever treating me, though records older than 7 years had been purged entirely. Marcus will claim the file was simply lost, Arthur explained. The signature may be false, but without a specimen or a witness, proving who actually created it will be difficult. We have the money trail. He'll argue every distribution was reasonable compensation approved by an independent trustee. And the recording, I asked. Helpful, Arthur said. Not conclusive on its own. We had evidence of harm on every page, and proof of deliberate intent on almost none of it. Then Nadine called with more trouble. Marcus had filed a motion accusing Arthur and Claire of pressuring me into changing my estate plan. Until the full hearing, Nadine said, I was to sign no new legal documents except through court-approved counsel. Arthur is my lawyer, I said. The court may need to review whether his past involvement creates a conflict, she said. Marcus wants him removed. I understand your concern, I said. Concern, the soft word people used while quietly closing doors. That evening, Arthur arrived at my house with boxes from his old archive. If the judge disqualifies me, he said, another attorney takes over, so we build the record now while we still can. We sorted through correspondence from Eleanor's final year together. Near 10 o'clock, I found a yellow note in her handwriting clipped to a draft of the trust. Ask Franklin's old accountant about Marcus's proposal. Walter must be told, together with Claire. No side meetings. What proposal? I asked. Arthur searched through the surrounding files and found nothing more. Claire, joining by video call, went quiet the moment she saw the note. I remember this, she said slowly. Marcus wanted Mom to move the Reyes shares into a private investment partnership he was creating himself. She refused. Why? I asked. She said the partnership was borrowing too aggressively, Claire said. A week later, Marcus told me she'd changed her mind. That's when I emailed him to stop pressuring her. Arthur checked his old calendar from that year. Franklin's accountant was a man named Thomas Keeler, he said. He passed away 5 years ago. Another dead witness. Did he leave a firm behind? I asked. He sold it before retiring, Arthur said. Claire leaned toward her camera. What happened to Mom's laptop? She asked. I looked toward the hall closet. Marcus took it after the funeral, I said. He told me he needed it for tax records. Did he take everything? Claire asked. Her desktop went to recycling, I said. The laptop went with him. Claire shook her head. Mom backed up every photograph she ever took, she said. She was terrified of losing them. I suddenly remembered the small black device Eleanor had plugged into her computer every Sunday evening, without fail. After she died, I'd packed it away with her camera equipment in a cedar chest and hadn't thought of it in years. Marcus had emptied her office completely, but he'd never once cared about her cameras. The chest was still up in the attic. Arthur called Nadine for permission before I climbed the stairs, and she insisted someone accompany me. Arthur stood below while I lowered the dusty chest down one step at a time. Inside were 2 camera bodies, several lenses, instruction manuals, and 3 portable hard drives wrapped together in an old dish towel. The first held photographs. The second held photographs and household records. The third was encrypted. Claire tried Eleanor's birthday. Wrong. My birthday. Wrong. Their wedding anniversary. Wrong. I studied the little password hint on the login screen. The safest investment. The house, I said aloud. I typed the street number and Eleanor's private nickname for our home. 418 Larkbrook. The drive opened. Folders filled the screen. Taxes, Reyes shares, trust drafts, medical records. One folder labeled Marcus Proposal contained scanned documents, emails, and a single audio file dated 6 weeks before Eleanor died. I pressed play. At first there was only rustling, then Eleanor's weakened voice. I'm recording this because I'm tired of being told I misunderstood. Marcus answered her. Mom, nobody's saying that. You asked me to sign the partnership papers right after Walter left for the pharmacy, she said. Because he gets emotional about money, Marcus said. It's our money, Mom. It's Reyes money. Grandpa meant it to build something, not sit in a trust paying out dividends forever. Your grandfather meant it to keep this family safe, Eleanor said. A chair scraped against the floor. Marcus's voice hardened. Claire's already tried to turn Dad against me, he said. If you leave her equal control, she'll destroy everything we have. Neither of you will control it while Walter's alive, Eleanor said. He can't manage it, Marcus said. He can manage himself, she said. Not after you're gone, he said. Eleanor paused. When she spoke again, every word came out perfectly clear. If you ever use my death to make your father feel helpless, you will lose more than this money. You will lose him. The recording ended. Nobody in the room moved. Eleanor had named Marcus's plan before it ever happened, and she had named exactly what it would cost him. Arthur made 3 copies of the drive before sunrise. One went into his office safe. One went to the bank's forensic team. Nadine took custody of the original and signed a receipt documenting every hand that had touched it. Marcus's attorney objected immediately, claiming the recording might have been altered, arguing a dying woman's private conversation had no bearing on my current capacity. He was right about one thing. The recording alone didn't prove every transaction that followed. But it changed how every other piece of evidence looked. Before Eleanor died, Marcus had already argued I couldn't manage the trust. He'd tried moving the Reyes shares into a partnership he controlled outright. He'd begun isolating Claire long before grief or surgery could ever be used as an excuse. His plan was no longer a series of decisions that happened to benefit him along the way. It had an origin. The hard drive gave us still more. Eleanor had scanned the entire partnership proposal. Marcus had wanted the trust to invest nearly all of the Reyes shares into an entity called Hensley Strategic Partners, an agreement granting him broad authority to borrow against the assets and collect a 2% annual management fee. Eleanor had written declined across every single page. There was also an email Marcus had sent 3 days after her refusal. Mom, if you lock the shares away with Dad, as beneficiary, you're handing a loaded weapon to a man who can't balance a checkbook. When he fails, don't expect me to clean it up for free. Arthur read the sentence twice aloud. For free, he repeated. Claire nodded slowly. Then Bridgeview started charging the trust, she said. The bank's forensic team uncovered a fourth discovery buried in their own archives. Gerald Combs, the deceased trust officer, had approved the first Bridgeview contract shortly after receiving what he'd internally called a business development loan from MDH Holdings, $160,000. No payment was ever recorded, and the debt quietly vanished from MDH's books 18 months later. A bribe, I said. Helen was more careful with her language. It has the appearance of an undisclosed financial conflict, she said. Investigators will decide what to call it. Combs had also overridden 3 separate automated compliance warnings. One flagged that Bridgeview's registered address matched Marcus's own correspondence address. Another flagged the size of the monthly fees. The third reminded him that annual medical recertification was overdue. He'd closed each alert with the identical note. Advisor confirms continuing incapacity. Beneficiary contact would cause distress. Marcus's name appeared beside every single confirmation. The trust committee suspended him that same afternoon. Under an emergency provision, no family member replaced him. A senior bank fiduciary stepped in as temporary advisor pending the court's full review. At 4 o'clock, Nadine returned my car keys. I completed the home and medical assessment, she said, and found no reason to restrict your ordinary daily decisions. I'll recommend the temporary guardianship terminate at the full hearing. I turned the keys over in my palm. Thank you, I said. You don't have to thank someone for returning a right that never should have been taken, she said. You followed the court order anyway, I said. I did, she said. And I learned something along the way. Professional caution protects people, but left unchecked, it becomes its own kind of control if we never stop to ask what the person actually wants. For the first time since walking into that bank, I felt the ground settle a little beneath me. Then a sheriff's detective called Arthur directly. The bank's elder exploitation report had been referred to a financial crimes unit. They wanted interviews and full access to the accounting. Criminal investigators were now looking at both Marcus and Denise. Claire expected me to feel some relief at the news. Instead, I walked to the kitchen sink and stood there with my back to the room. Dad, what's wrong? She asked. When Marcus was 5, I said, he stole $3 from your mother's purse and bought candy for every child on our street. When we confronted him, he cried, because he genuinely believed being generous made the stealing forgivable. I made him return whatever candy he had left and work off the rest mowing lawns. Eleanor told him a kind purpose never cleans dirty hands. Claire waited. I thought he'd understood that lesson, I said. Maybe he did, back then. Where did I lose him? You didn't make him do any of this, Claire said. No, I said, but I helped him believe being needed made him entitled to whatever he wanted. Claire came and stood beside me. And you helped me believe that being angry made me disposable, she said. I turned toward her. If we're going to rebuild anything, she said, we don't get to lie to each other kindly anymore. You're right, I said. Marcus made his choices. You made yours, I made mine, and your mother wasn't here to stop any of us from making them. I gave a small, sad laugh. She certainly tried, I said. Claire looked at Eleanor's photograph on the wall. Yes, she said quietly, she really did. My phone lit up with a message from Denise, not a call this time, a photograph of Marcus sitting alone at their dark kitchen table, head in his hands. He hasn't slept, the message read. If you keep pushing, I'm afraid of what he'll do. Arthur told me not to respond. I typed 3 words anyway. Call a doctor. I did not offer money. I did not promise to end the case. Concern could be genuine without becoming surrender. Denise showed up at my house Thursday morning, alone, holding Eleanor's silver candlesticks in a paper shopping bag. A news van was still parked at the corner, so I let her in after calling Arthur, who joined the conversation on speakerphone. "These are yours," she said, setting the candlesticks on the table. They always were. "Marcus told me you'd given them to us," I said. "Did you believe that?" I asked. She unbuttoned her coat but didn't sit. "In the beginning, yes," she said. "When did you stop believing it?" I asked. She looked older, without the careful composure she'd worn in the courthouse hallway. "I knew the care reports overstated everything we actually did," she admitted. "Marcus said it was necessary because the trust would only reimburse formal services. We handled your bills, your house, your doctors. He said the fee compensated us just for being available." 29,000 a month, I said. "It wasn't always that much," she said quietly. "The first payment was 18,000. It just kept growing." "You already know everything," she said toward the phone. Arthur's voice came through steady. "We know the records," he said. "We're giving you the chance to tell Walter the truth behind them." Denise sat down at last. "Marcus's real estate business was already failing when your wife got sick," she said. "He'd personally guaranteed several loans. If the banks called them due, we would have lost our own house, and he'd have lost his broker's license entirely. He believed the Reyes shares should have gone to him outright, that he'd earned some claim to them your wife refused to see." "Because the shares were hers," I said. "Neither of you built that company." Denise pressed her lips together. "After your surgery, Combs showed Marcus exactly how the advisor provision worked," she said. "Combs wanted a cut. Marcus paid him through the development company instead." "Who actually wrote the neurologist's letter?" Arthur asked. Her eyes dropped to the table. "Denise," I said. "Combs provided a template," she said. "Marcus filled in the details himself." "And Dr. Preston's signature?" I asked. "I never watched him sign it," she said. "That isn't what I asked," I said. "He scanned a real signature off a seminar certificate," she admitted. "Combs said nobody would ever check, since the cardiologist's letter already supported temporary incapacity, and the trust only needed the second letter on file to make the whole thing look complete." Arthur spoke calmly through the phone. "Are you willing to give a sworn statement?" he asked. Denise looked at me. "If Walter agrees not to pursue claims against me personally," she said. There it was, the offer beneath every other offer. "What did you actually do?" I asked. "Bridgeview was my company," she said, "but Marcus directed every trust request that went through it." "You signed the monthly reports," I said. "He supplied the information," she said. "You wrote that you bathed me," I said. Her face reddened. "The categories were standardized," she said. "You wrote that I couldn't dress myself," I said, "while I was spending my Wednesdays replacing brake lines on a museum locomotive." "I didn't fully know," she said. "You knew enough to submit the invoice," I said. Denise opened her purse and set a small flash drive on the table. "This holds company emails, invoices, and voicemails," she said. "It also contains the furnace work order." My calm finally broke. "What furnace work order?" I asked. "Marcus told my brother to make the house look unsafe before he filed the petition," she said. "He was only supposed to document deferred maintenance. My brother disconnected the switch himself. He said it wouldn't do any real damage." "You photographed the thermostat," I said. She didn't deny it. "You left the Cedarview contract sitting on my table," I said. "We needed the judge to see a safe placement already existed," she said. "You made my home unsafe just to prove I needed to leave it," I said. "The closing was set for Monday," she said. "If the deal fell through, everything would come apart at once." I stood and walked to the window. Snow rested on the porch rail. Eleanor had repainted every third summer without fail. Marcus and Denise had reduced my entire life to a series of obstacles standing between them and a closing date. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "Protection," she said. "I'll return the jewelry, the vehicles, whatever's left in Bridgeview's accounts. I'll sell my share of the house. I'll testify that Marcus directed the entire scheme." "And you want me to say you were only another victim?" I asked. "He lied to me too," she said. "Did he force you to disconnect the furnace?" I asked. "No." "Did he force you to sign 81 care report?" "No." "Did he force you to stand between me and that front door Sunday night?" She began to cry, and this time the tears may have been real. "No," she whispered. "Then I won't buy your honesty with another lie," I said. She pushed the drive across the table. "You'll need this," she said. "If it contains evidence, Give it to your own attorney and to investigators, I said. Arthur will arrange the handoff. I brought it to you because you wanted a bargain, she said. Denise looked toward the family photographs on my wall. Marcus said you'd forgive him eventually, she said. He said fathers always protect their sons in the end. For a long time he was right, I said. What changed? She asked. I learned that protection isn't the same thing as preventing consequences, I said. She left without the candlesticks. Arthur stayed quiet on the line until her car had pulled away. Don't touch the drive, he said. I'll send an investigator to collect it properly. I lifted one candlestick from the bag. Wax from Eleanor's last Christmas still filled the base of the cup. Arthur, I don't feel victorious, I said. Good, he said quietly. Victory is for games. This is accountability. The full hearing began 13 days after I first walked into Cedar County Trust. This time the trust dispute and the guardianship matter were heard together in a larger courtroom filled to capacity. Judge Renner barred cameras, though reporters lined the hallway outside regardless. Marcus arrived without Denise, his face hollow, having replaced his original attorneys with a criminal defense lawyer and separate probate counsel. Denise sat across the aisle beside her own attorney entirely. The bank petitioned to remove Marcus permanently, recover every improper distribution, and enforce Article 11's forfeiture clause. Arthur asked the court to terminate the guardianship and restore all my rights outright. Claire asked for nothing except public acknowledgement that the documents attributed to her had been forged. Marcus opposed everything, though his strategy had shifted. He no longer denied every irregularity outright. He claimed Gerald Combs had designed the entire arrangement, that Denise had administered it, and that he had simply relied on professionals while caring for a vulnerable father. He admitted shielding me from financial information, but described it as compassionate protection rather than concealment. Helen testified first, walking the court through the account match for my loan application. The bank's forensic accountant followed with simple charts, tracing the money from the trust into Bridgeview, MDH, the dealership, the country club, and the travel vendors, showing the $160,000 loan to Combs and its quiet disappearance 18 months later. Then Raphael explained the furnace switch. A work order recovered from the flash drive, issued by Denise's company, instructed a contractor to disable the heating system pending safety placement, dated 2 days before the guardianship petition was filed. A text from Denise to her brother read, "Need the house under 50 degrees by Friday morning. Make it reversible." Marcus's attorney objected that his client hadn't sent that particular message. Arthur agreed readily. "Denise sent it," he said. "We aren't claiming otherwise." Then he displayed a message Marcus had sent Denise the night before. "Judge needs visual proof. Dad can't stay there. Have your brother handle it while Dad's out at breakfast?" Marcus stared at the screen without any expression at all. The geriatric specialist testified again, carefully distinguishing between grief, temporary postoperative delirium, ordinary aging, and true dementia. Nadine described my functioning during her 14-day appointment and recommended the guardianship end immediately. Mrs. Lee doesn't need a substitute decision maker, she said. He needs accurate information and freedom from interference. Claire took the stand and described losing contact with me and raising Eli without a grandfather in his life. She didn't embellish. She didn't ask for sympathy. Her restraint accomplished what anger never could have. Denise testified under a cooperation agreement that guaranteed her nothing. She admitted signing false care reports, participating in the furnace scheme, and helping prepare the documents I'd been asked to sign at Sunday dinner. She said Marcus had built the false medical letter using Combs's original template. On cross-examination, Marcus's own attorney pointed out that Denise hoped for reduced charges and was already planning a divorce. "You'll say anything to save yourself, won't you?" he asked her. Denise looked back at him steadily. "I said whatever saved me for 9 years," she said. "Today I'm saying what condemns me too." Arthur called Marcus to the stand. He exercised his right not to answer questions that might incriminate him in a parallel criminal matter. But this was a civil proceeding as well, and the judge could weigh every other piece of evidence, regardless of his silence. Arthur played the Sunday dinner recording. Marcus's own voice filled the courtroom. The trust company needed documentation. The cardiologist's letter wasn't enough. Then Arthur played Eleanor's recording. If you ever use my death to make your father feel helpless, you will lose more than this money. You will lose him. Marcus closed his eyes and did not open them again until the recording finished. Finally, I took the stand myself. Arthur began with ordinary questions: my work history, my pension, my medications, the furnace, the loan, Helen's office, the number on her screen. "What did you think when you learned the trust held over $26 million?" he asked. "I thought someone had made a mistake," I said. "Were you pleased?" he asked. "No," I said. "Why not?" "Because the woman across the desk looked frightened for me," I said. "He asked about my dependence on Marcus, and I told the whole truth, including the parts that didn't flatter me." I described the unopened mail after Eleanor died, calling Marcus in tears more than once, forgetting an appointment, leaving a kettle on while I reset a breaker. "Do those things mean you lack capacity?" Arthur asked. "No," I said. "They mean I'm human and 72. A few people in the gallery shifted in their seats. "Why did you trust Marcus?" Arthur asked. "Because he's my son," I said. "Because he stayed close. Because every time he took a decision out of my hands, he called it help." "Did you consent to his management of the trust?" "I didn't know the trust existed." "Did you authorize the payments to Bridgeview?" "No." "Did you want to move to Cedarview?" "No." "What do you want now?" he asked. I looked directly at Judge Renner. "My keys, my house, my bank statements," I said. "My right to make a good decision or a bad one without having grief mistaken for a diagnosis. I want my daughter's name cleared publicly. I want this trust managed by people who are paid openly and watched carefully. And I want my son to stop calling control love." Marcus's attorney rose for cross-examination. He asked whether I still spoke to Eleanor's photograph on the mantel. "Yes," I said. "You understand your wife is dead," he said. "Every minute of every day," I said. "Yet you still speak to her." "Sometimes the dead are easier to trust than the living," I said. The judge glanced down at her notes, perhaps hiding a reaction of her own. The attorney asked whether Claire now spent several days a week at my house. "Yes." "Whether she stood to inherit under the original trust?" "Yes." "Whether I intended to reward her for it?" I told him I'd made no changes to my estate while the case remained pending. "But you might," he said. "I might also spend it all on the ridiculous fishing boat my wife once told me to buy," I said. A quiet laugh moved through the gallery. Even Judge Renner smiled before calling the room back to order. His final question was the one Marcus's entire case had been built around from the start. "Mr. Hensley, isn't it true that without your son, your bills, your health care, and your property would have collapsed into chaos after your wife died?" I considered it honestly for a moment. "Yes," I said. "He helped me when I was weak. That's exactly why what came afterward worked so well. A thief at the door would never have gotten in. My son already had a key." Judge Renner took a 2-hour recess. When she returned, she read her decision from the bench without preamble. She found clear and convincing evidence that I possessed full capacity and that no guardianship was warranted, and the temporary order ended immediately. She found that Marcus had acted in bad faith, concealed material information, engaged in self-dealing, and used a fabricated incapacity process to maintain control over the trust for 9 years. He was permanently removed from every role connected to it. Under Article 11, he would be treated as having predeceased me for purposes of the remainder. He would inherit nothing from his mother's trust. The bank was ordered to complete a full accounting, pursue recovery of every improper distribution, and develop a restitution plan. All disputed assets tied to Bridgeview or MDH were placed under preservation orders, and the court referred its findings directly to the district attorney and the state's elder protection agency. She declined to name Claire as advisor, and instead approved my request for an independent 3-person trust committee, 1 professional fiduciary, 1 accountant, 1 elder law advocate, requiring written notice to me and unanimous approval for any distribution above $100,000 until the civil recovery concluded. Then she looked directly at Marcus. "Mr. Hensley, guardianship is among the most serious powers this court can grant," she said. "It exists to protect human dignity, not to convert vulnerability into access. Your father's age never made his rights negotiable." Marcus bowed his head. The gavel came down once. My life belonged to me again. Marcus waited near the courthouse stairwell after most people had filed out. His attorneys stood a respectful distance away. Arthur stayed close enough to watch us both. Claire had gone downstairs with Nadine. For the first time in years, Marcus didn't look like a businessman or a devoted caregiver. He looked like my son after a long illness, thin and frightened and unsure whether I would still reach for him. "Dad," he said. I waited. "Denise gave them everything," he said. "The records existed before she ever spoke a word," I said. "She disconnected the furnace on your instruction," I said. "I never meant for you to get hurt," he said. "It was one night. We knew you had space heaters. You knew I was inside that house," I said. He looked away. "The hotel deal would have saved everyone, not just me," he said. "You'd have had the best room in the building. Bought from your wife's brother at more than double its worth," I said. "I could have made it work eventually," he said, his voice rising before he caught himself. "I made mistakes, Dad, but I managed that trust for 9 years, and it grew. The investments grew under the corporate trustee," I said. "You simply took the fees." "I kept Claire away because Mom knew how reckless she could be," he said. "Your mother told you to stop turning us against each other," I said. He flinched. "She recorded me while she was dying," he said. "How is that fair?" "Truth doesn't become unfair just because you never knew it had a witness," I said. Marcus's eyes filled. "They're going to charge me," he said. "Probably," I said. "You could tell them this is a family matter," he said. "The bank already reported it," I said. "But you could refuse to cooperate further," he said. "You could say you don't want prosecution." There it was, the request hiding beneath every other request he'd ever made. "What would you do if I agreed?" I asked. Hope flickered across his face. "I'd make restitution," he said. "I'd sell the house, the cars, everything we have left. I'd go to counseling. I'd rebuild all of this. Would you admit what you did in writing?" I asked. His hope faded fast. "My lawyer says I can't," he said. "Would you apologize to Claire publicly?" I asked. "That could be used against me," he said. "Would you admit I have capacity?" I asked. "Of course," he said, "but the petition was based on what I believed at the time. Even now, every truth he offered came with a door left open for his own escape." I stepped closer. "Marcus," I said, "I can forgive the 5-year-old who stole $3 for candy. I can forgive the frightened son who took over my bills after surgery. I may even forgive the man standing in front of me right now, someday. But I will not protect the man who forged my incapacity, stole 9 years of my life, and tried to lock me away the moment I discovered it." He began to cry. "I'm your son," he said. "Yes," I said, my own voice nearly failing. "That's exactly why this hurts. It isn't why the consequences disappear." "Then you're choosing Claire," he said. "No," I said. "I'm choosing the truth. You're the one who made it feel like only one child could ever remain." He wiped his face with the back of his hand. "Mom would hate this," he said. "Your mother warned you about this years ago," I said. His attorneys approached, and a detective waited near the courtroom doors, not to arrest him that day, only to arrange an interview. Marcus looked at me one final time. "If I go to prison, that's on you," he said. I shook my head. "No, son," I said. "That sentence belongs to you." He walked away. I leaned against the wall after he disappeared down the stairwell. Arthur stood beside me without speaking. "Was I cruel just now?" I asked. "No," he said. "It felt cruel. Boundaries usually do, to someone who's survived by crossing them." Claire came back up and took my hand without asking what Marcus had said. She simply stood beside me until I could walk again on my own. The legal proceedings outlasted the headlines by more than a year. Investigators traced money through Bridgeview, MDH, vehicle titles, club accounts, and real estate transfers. The house above the golf club was sold. Both vehicles were surrendered. Bridgeview's remaining accounts were turned over in full. The trust ultimately recovered a little more than $3 million, though legal and forensic costs consumed a portion of it, and the motel purchase had never actually left the trust. So the principal remained close to $26 million despite everything that had happened. Denise pleaded guilty to conspiracy, falsifying business records, and attempted financial exploitation of an older adult. Her cooperation reduced her sentence, but it didn't erase it. She served 9 months in county custody, followed by home confinement and restitution supervision. Marcus rejected the first plea offer, continuing to insist Combs had designed the scheme and Denise had executed it. until a digital forensics expert recovered deleted drafts of the false medical letter from an old backup, with Marcus's own username sitting in the revision history. He pleaded guilty before trial. The judge sentenced him to 26 months in federal custody for fraud-related offenses, followed by supervised release and joint restitution obligations. Some people online said the sentence was too light. Others said I should have simply saved my son. None of them had ever sat at our kitchen table when he was 9 years old. None of them had watched him teach Claire how to throw a baseball. None of them had heard Eleanor tell him, in her own weakening voice, exactly what he stood to lose. Justice didn't erase those memories. It made room for them to exist without overruling the present. I wrote Marcus once a month. I never sent money beyond what prison rules allowed for basic books and calls. I didn't contact anyone seeking special treatment on his behalf. My letters described ordinary things: the weather, repairs at the Rail Museum, Eli's baseball games, a maple limb that came down in a March storm. For 6 months he didn't answer. Then a letter finally arrived. Dad, I keep trying to write an apology that doesn't sound like a defense. Every version I draft includes a reason. Mom died. The business failed. Combs showed me a loophole. Denise wanted the house. You needed help. Claire hated me. All of that happened, but none of it made my hand sign your name. At first I told myself I was only borrowing authority, that I'd stabilize everything and hand it back before you noticed. Then I liked being the person everyone had to ask. When you thanked me, I felt powerful and ashamed at the exact same time. And the shame made me hide more, which meant I needed even more control. I don't expect forgiveness. I only wanted you to know I finally understand you were never the weak one in this family. I was. Marcus. I read it 3 times, then placed it in the drawer beside Eleanor's letter. Not because the 2 letters carried equal weight, but because the truth had finally entered both of them. Claire and I rebuilt slowly. I didn't write her a large check and expect 9 years to repair themselves overnight. We began with Wednesdays. She and Eli came to the Rail Museum after school, and I taught him the difference between a locomotive motor and a generator while Claire brought sandwiches. Sometimes we spoke about the years we'd lost. Sometimes we simply didn't. When the college restored her position, I attended her first public lecture, and she introduced me to the room, simply as her father. The word felt like an honor I was still earning back one Wednesday at a time. I asked her once whether she wanted to serve as a future trust advisor herself. She said no. Good, I told her. Your mother would approve completely. We revised my estate plan with independent counsel that spring. Claire remained a beneficiary, but no family member would ever again hold control over another person's health or daily finances. Marcus's forfeiture under Eleanor's trust was irrevocable. In my personal will, I left him a small supervised education fund for any future grandchildren, along with a box of family photographs. I wasn't ready to leave him wealth. I wasn't willing to erase his existence either. With the Trust Committee's help, I established the Eleanor Reyes Voice Project with an initial $5 million endowment, funding independent legal consultations and financial reviews for older adults facing questionable guardianship petitions or suspect exploitation. Helen joined its advisory board. Nadine trained volunteers to ask one essential question before anything else. What does the older person actually want? Arthur refused a paid position outright and agreed only to attend meetings, provided someone finally served decent coffee. I repaired the porch that spring. I replaced the furnace, even though the old one still ran perfectly fine, because I no longer wanted that machine humming beneath my floor, like a memory of something someone used against me. The new system cost $7,900, and I paid the invoice myself and kept a copy in my own file, in my own name. Then I bought a fishing boat. It wasn't ridiculous, not entirely. A used 22-foot center console with a reliable motor and just enough room for 3 people. I named it Eleanor's Rebuttal. Claire laughed when she saw the lettering across the stern. She'd hate that, she said. She'd pretend to... I agreed. 2 years after I first walked into Cedar County Trust, Helen invited me to speak at a training session for new bank employees. I didn't try to teach them how to spot every kind of fraud. Experts already handled that part. I told them instead what it felt like to be the person sitting across the desk. Don't assume an old coat means poverty, I told them. Don't assume a large balance means someone is free. And whenever a relative insists on answering every question for an older person, find a respectful way to hear that older person alone anyway. Afterward, a young loan officer asked what I would have done if my furnace had never failed that Tuesday night. The question stayed with me for a long time afterward. Perhaps I would have found the trust eventually on my own. Perhaps the bank would have mailed a new statement someday. Perhaps the motel plan would have triggered an audit somewhere down the line. Perhaps Claire would have tried once more to reach me. Or perhaps Marcus would have moved me into Cedarview that very Monday. The closing would have gone through without incident, and every objection I ever raised again would have simply been entered into a chart, somewhere as agitation. I might have spent the remainder of my life being cared for by people paid with my own money, while my son quietly explained to anyone who asked that I no longer understood any of it. A $6,000 loan application didn't save me all by itself. Helen's decision to lock her office door and ask one more question did. Claire's refusal to destroy old evidence did. Arthur's careful copies did. Eleanor's foresight, written into a trust years before any of us knew we'd need it, did. And eventually, my own willingness to admit that trusting someone never required me to ignore what he had actually done. On the second anniversary of the court's decision, Claire, Eli, and I took Eleanor's rebuttal out onto Lake Kessler. The morning was clear and cold, a thin mist resting just above the water. Eli held his fishing rod with fierce concentration, while Claire poured coffee from a thermos, and I sat at the wheel and watched sunlight spread slowly across the surface of the lake. "Grandpa," Eli said, "Mom says you're rich." Claire nearly spilled her coffee. "I didn't say it quite like that," she said. I laughed. "Your mother's right." I told him, though probably not for the reason you think. He frowned. "Do you still have $26 million? Children ask the questions adults spend their whole lives learning how to dress up in nicer clothes. "Something close to that," I said. "Then why is your car so old?" he asked. "Because it still starts," I said. He considered that answer seriously and nodded. "And because money is only a tool," I added. "If you let it become the one in charge, it will start making terrible decisions on its own." Claire looked toward the shoreline. "That sounds exactly like Grandma," she said. "Most of my good ideas usually do," I told her. Ellie's line jerked hard, and he shouted and began reeling with everything he had. The fish was small, no longer than my hand, but he celebrated as though he'd pulled treasure straight out of the lake floor. I helped him work the hook free. He wanted to keep it. I told him it was too small. "But I caught it," he protested. "That doesn't mean it belongs to you forever," I said. He looked disappointed for a moment, then lowered the fish gently back into the water, and it flashed once beneath the surface before it disappeared entirely. Claire rested her hand on my shoulder. "For years I believed peace meant keeping the family together at any cost," she said. "I know better now. Peace isn't a locked door, or a quiet argument, or a lie everyone silently agrees never to examine too closely. Peace is being able to sit inside your own life without asking anyone's permission first." I still loved Marcus. Some mornings that love felt like grief. Some evenings it felt like something closer to hope. Forgiveness, I learned slowly, was never a door I had to force open before I was ready. It was a road I could simply walk without carrying him the entire way on my back. Claire and I could never recover the 8 years we'd lost between us. We could only refuse to lose the next 8. The money paid for lawyers, for repairs, for restitution work, and for chances I had never once imagined for myself. But the most valuable thing returned to me was never listed in any accounting at all. It was my own voice, the same voice Marcus had once described as confused, the same voice I had silenced for years, just to avoid conflict at my own table, the same voice that finally told a courtroom, a bank, and my own son, in plain and steady words, that I was still here. As we turned the boat back toward the dock, I thought once more of that first quiet question in Helen's office. "Why are you asking us for $6,000, Mr. Hensley?" At the time, I truly believed I was only there to repair a furnace.